go. Welcome, everybody. This is Activities Across Grade Levels, and today we're going to talk about engaging students in history lessons. So you may be a history teacher, you may be a teacher teaching history in elementary grades or something like this. Regardless, we are excited to share some thoughts with you. So first thing we do is we pass out thanks, because that's good karma. So first of all of you folks in Fowler Unified, Susan's folks, all right, thank you for joining us either live now or watching the recording. Additionally, all of my people up in Jerome in Idaho, we are happy to have you here as well. Let's give a shout out to Richard. Richard Byrne and I do a Friday webinar called Two EdTech Guys Take Questions and Share Cool Stuff, which about describes it. All right, and you can join us at 10 a.m. Pacific or 1 p.m. Eastern on Fridays. I believe that is that 2 a.m. your time, Nate, in Japan?
Yeah, roughly. Yep.
Something in that range, right?
Around like, yeah, 9 or 10, 11, something like that. Yeah.
Dang early or late, or however you might put it. So Susan and I just love saying hello every week. Susan, give us a little bit of background on you.
Yeah, my name is Susan Stewart. I'm an instructional technology teacher on special assignment. Say that 10 times fast. I call myself a tech coach. I'm a tech coach in Central California. Before being a tech coach, I spent 14 years in kindergarten and second grade. So I come from the background of early childhood education. And now I support 120 amazing teachers in Fowler.
Fantastic. And one of the great contributors to the hashtag K2Can2, which we'll talk about towards the end. My name is Rushton. I'm a former high school teacher of Japanese language, a former principal, and now I run a little nonprofit to save the world. But I want to introduce our special guest this week, Nate. Nate, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, first, thanks a lot for having me. Really excited about this, even though it's way early in Japan. But yeah, I'm a diploma program and middle years program individuals and societies teacher. So I teach DP history, where I act as DLL, Department Leader of Learning, kind of HOD for you. I did spend about 4 years as a technology coach as well, but decided, you know what, I just want to go back in the classroom. So I do, a whole whack of stuff for Google. On the side, do ed tech consulting and that kind of thing, and obviously help my colleagues at school, and more recently here in Japan that, people going through the pandemic that have never taught online or with computers before. So it's been a busy time for a lot of people out there, I'm sure. Anyhow, yeah, thanks for having me, and look forward to hearing from people in the chat. At the end, you'll see on my other slide, you can get in touch with me on Twitter and that kind of thing. Looking forward to chatting.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, if you're in a hurry to do that, feel free to click on the link that I just tossed into the chat right now to get to Nate's Twitter page. And I want to actually give a special shout out to Guy Bressler, who is one of our attendees, but he is in Israel and spent time in Japan. So we've got loads of connections happening here. That is nothing but good fun there. All right, so my little shindig is Next Vista for Learning, nextvista.org. It's a library of videos by and for teachers and students everywhere, free to use, free to contribute to, free to download from, all for a student audience, all screen content, my own little attempt to save the universe from ignorance, one creative video at a time. Thank you very much. Now, what we're doing with these webinars is to try to keep everything going, right? So it has certainly been the case that everybody's been doing some serious adjusting to the idea of distance education, remote learning, online instruction, all of these things. And the truth is that whether you are teaching in person or you are teaching online, by regularly getting together with others and sharing cool ideas, everything gets easier, more fun, and it's more personally and professionally satisfying in the just saying category, right? So a little bit how this works. So our show, as it is, Activities Across Grade Levels, is designed to pick any given thing, in this case, engaging history kids, and talking about how that works at the early years, K to 2, the upper elementary, grades 3 to 5, as we call it in the US, middle school, 6 to 8, grades 6 to 8, and then high school grades 9 to 12. And so we're going to share some ideas with you over the next, call it 25 minutes or so. And hopefully you will walk away with some things that you're like, I can't wait to try this with my students. So let's start with the young learners. And for that, I hand it over to the wildly cool and wonderful Susan Stewart.
All right, thank you, Rushton. So talking a little bit about the early years, when we're talking about history, I can speak to my own children and that they don't have, young learners developmentally don't understand history, right? Everything is yesterday. And in my house, it's not even yesterday, it's lasterday. Lasterday could be yesterday. It could have been 3 months ago. So when my 4-year-old tells story, do you remember yesterday when we went trick-or-treating? Sweetheart, that was 6 months ago. But for him, his understanding of before now, that's developmentally appropriate. He doesn't have a lot of it because he's young. And that's something, those spheres of influence and understanding of the world around them expand with time. So when we talking about history with young learners, it's very ego, right? It's themselves. So when we talk about developing that, they can do things like tell about themselves. They know this. This is something they can understand, and they can see time passing using something like a timeline of their own life, right? When was I born? Well, I learned to walk first, and then I started TK, and then I learned to swim. So they can look at time passing in their own life as a developmentally appropriate way to talk about history because they can relate to it. Things that happened first and the order in which they happened. So I use the timeline template. It's a free activity that I got from readwritethink.org. And it's this great little interactive widget that I can put in images, really basic, but I can then download this and embed it into other things as well. So this is just a timeline, and that helps them develop time, that concept of history. As we teach students, a lot of the elementary social studies and history standards have to do with getting to know our community. Because again, that expanding influence, understanding, so it's me and then just the things around me, my family. That's something I can understand. And then community helpers is a big thing we talk about in the early years. So we can talk about historical people or people who help our community. So sometimes we'll do posters and mock magazine covers. I'll show that in another page. But again, having them understand people and historical people that lived a long time ago. Oftentimes in grade 2, we talk about the presidents in the United States. We talk about the US presidents. And most of them understand that there are presidents like named Abe and George, but they don't always know that there are a lot of other presidents from the United States over time. So we'll do things like president reports where they pick someone from history and they learn about them and they do some kind of creative activity to show what they know. And then of course, any kind of then and now activities are appropriate for young learners as well. Something that helps them, sort, well, this is how we do it now, but back in the day, meaning, a few years ago. So on the next page, Rushton, I have a couple examples of both of these. So on the left, those are 2 activities that are having to do with past and present, helping kids understand the characteristics of things that might be have been from the past. Just the simplicity of the black and white picture in the old airplane, and then of course the newer version, the color picture. How can I tell? And so we have students start to look at old pictures and new pictures using that examples from Seesaw. And then on the bottom, there is one there that's a Google drawing sort, where we have a variety of toys, because kids understand toys, and they can look at the toy and decide, is that something that I play with now or something from before? Funny activity, there's a pile of Legos in that stack there, and sometimes the kids will say, well, my dad used to play with Legos, and they have a hard time understanding where that fits. So some will actually stick it right in the middle because it's not really old, but dad played with it, so it must have been some time ago, right? And then, that example of the historical figure, I use really simple Google Drawings templates or Google Slides templates to have kids, the technology task for them is to find a photo and write some facts. So in 2nd grade, we would do these often, whoever we were learning about, and we would start with one that we would all do together, but then they could go through and find the photo and write facts about the people from history, that we learned about in 2nd grade. A couple other things there. I think we're moving on now to the upper elementary. As students start to expand their understanding of the world, then they can connect to the history of the world. And one of the most common things kids do, especially here, it's grade 5, they do state reports, right? And no matter where you live, usually there's some comparable activity, because now we've gone from local to maybe regional, and then we go back to national. And so kids in 5th grade oftentimes learn about the states. And we've got a very common activity where everybody does a report about one state. So we're talking about how could we take that state report we've been doing for ages and kick it up a notch or 10. And so we started doing websites, and every student would do a website about a state, but it would be more than just facts. If you look at that example there, that same timeline app that the young learners did, they would do a timeline of historical things that happened in that state. They'd bring in maps of important places in the state, people, maybe famous people that come from that state. So it took it just a little further. It wasn't just I wrote a couple paragraphs about a particular state, but they created this content from which others can learn. So they got to learn about each other's states through their various websites. And again, it went further than just a few facts on a page. So it was really, really fun to evolve that concept of the state report into something more interactive and useful for others. And then I shared this one in a previous activity, but I really like the idea of giving students perspective. You know, and during the Industrial Revolution, this was child labor laws, and this is a 10 or 12-year-old girl. Our students in the upper elementary can start to relate. Wow, what would it have been like to work in that factory, to be forced to work for all these hours of the day? It was dirty, it was hot. And so having students write letters as that person, as they were living that. So we learned about the Industrial Revolution, and then I can sometimes kick that up a notch. I'll use some creative photo tools, and I grabbed this photo of my children and my 10-year-old there, and I used the tool remove.bg, and you can see how I magically, with the tool remove.bg, put her into the photo. So now when she writes that letter, trying to imagine the perspective of what's going through, she can really kind of imagine what it was like. And it's a fun, creative thing, but it is also about giving them that perspective of what it might be like to actually be in those circumstances. I don't know if we can hear you, Rushton.
Oh, I figured that out. One of those, you know, I think that has become a drinking game for a lot of teachers, is like, and you're muted, right? You know, these kinds of things. But in moving it up to middle school, just a reminder to all who are attending, if you want to toss something into the chat where you have an observation or a tool or a question along the way, feel free, because we're happy to engage those as we go. So for middle school, I'm going to hand things over to our man in Japan, Nate. Nate, talk to us.
Okay, groovy. All right, so we talk middle school and high school. I'm going to go with kind of two perspectives. One, something that might get the class started, and then something you could use probably for like the main bulk of your lesson as you are teaching remotely. But keep in mind, these are things that you can do in the classroom as well. It's not just while you're, you know, we're in this pandemic thing going on, right? So the first one is really simple, which is why I think it's good for middle school. It's called Answer Garden, and essentially, you know, all the students do. You set this up as a teacher, I guarantee you it'll take about 30 seconds. Basically, you set up a single tab online through a website called Answer Garden. You give one question or one provocation. You choose whether the students have a 20 or 40 character limit. If you want to get deep into like passwords and things, then you can get an account, but you don't need an account and you don't need to log in to do this. And if you can see that image on the left where it says internal conflict, civil wars, that's a screenshot of what the students produced. But, you know, there would be that question at the top, right? You know, so I think this was kind of like, when we say conflict, you know, what comes to mind? And then you can see the words and phrases within 40 characters that students had said. And look at, you know, domestic violence, protests, religious, you know, beliefs, fighting for certain rights, great stuff. That created the beginning of a conversation that we could say, okay, so why is it that human beings have these kind of conflicts now in the 21st century, right? If you look at that link that says try it, then go ahead, tap on there. There's an Answer Garden that I created. You can go and see it. What's cool about that is when people, well, we don't have to try it now, but if you want, go for it since it's there. You would have to throw that in the chat, right? But basically, as students write words or phrases, anything that's common and more than one person has written, it starts to grow bigger. And that's why they call it an Answer Garden. All these words grow. Way cool tool. Another one is called Mentimeter. I don't know if you're using it or not, but what I've shown you on the right side there is Mentimeter's version of creating, you know, kind of a word wall. It serves in the same purpose. However, I bring up Mentimeter because there's a whole pile of other options and things that you can do within it, whether it's scrolling text in comments or whether it's polling. Answer Garden, very easy. Mentimeter, you will have to make an account, but way easy to use. Let's go to the next ones, Rushton. Sorry, I'm going quickly here, folks, but cognizant of time. Now, this one I think is a really fun activity. My students really enjoy this, and what we do with this is use Google Forms to practice keyword searches to help them kind of focus on what is it that I'm really trying to find. And essentially what I do is set up my Google form in such a way that they get their provocation, which is a hint, right? This was, you know, whatever it might be, right? Like maybe a place where, you know, we believe it might have been religious worship, but I put a couple of keywords in there that I hope that they're going to jump on. And then they go to Google search and then they do a search, making a question with those keywords. And hopefully that's going to get them to really focus on the heart of what I want them to find. And it's like, oh, well, maybe that was Stonehenge. But the form is set up so that when they type in the response, it automatically, it has to be the exact response. They've got it right or they got it wrong before they can move on. So I gamify, I turn it into a bit of a challenge. Sometimes I'll pair them up and they work as a team. One is filling in the answers while the other's got the other computer open. But of course it works with individuals as well. And there's a link with a tutorial about 10 minutes long, but shows you exactly how to do that. Not too difficult, lots of fun. My kids love it. Let's move on.
Well,
am I going too quickly for you?
You're doing just fine. I do want to say that it's a characteristic of many of the most talented history teachers I know, that they just get something in front of the students and say, what do you see? What do you think? How would you begin exploring this? That process of beginning to ask better and better and better questions and being in an environment where the students get the chance to hear each other think through possibilities. Mm-hmm. That's always for me like a beautiful thing to see in a history class.
Hey, listen, for me, curiosity just gets me excited. So let's give them opportunities to be curious, right?
Amen. 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 Let's get you to high school. So
yeah.
Here we go.
Okay, so here I deliberately chose a couple here that you may not have heard. These are kind of like debate apps, right? Now, the other ones I showed you, you can definitely use them in high school. I use them as well. Here's one that kind of raises the game a little bit, and I'm not sure if it's called Triciter or Triciter or Triciter or whatever, but basically it's an online debating app. And so you would put in your provocation. The only thing, I use this with high school because it's a little bit clunky in that when students go to put in their answer, then you'll get a dialog box that pops up and it'll say, log in with Google, or, you can see in smaller text, no thanks, I don't want to. And then it'll take you in, which is the only reason why I kind of try to avoid it with my younger students. But anyway, essentially, you, for free, and you don't need to log in or have an account, you just type in whatever your provocation is, and then people just start typing in ideas. And what's kind of cool with it is, then people can, give you a plus or a minus, and then you get a little bit of a debate going. So where it says pros or cons, if you were to add a comment based on that first one that I put in, you would say plus or minus, pro or con, right? And then you would give my feedback or your feedback, kind of like, well, I understand your point. However, and then you add your thing. And if you agree with something somebody said, you can actually vote up for it as well. You can upvote for yourself too. The giving a name is optional, so you might want to mention to your students, hey, please put in your initial there or something like that. Now it's an online debate thing where, it can go back and forth and that kind of thing, but it's a great opportunity to talk to students about citizenship, right? We say digital citizenship, but let's face it, we live in the digital world today, it's citizenship, period. So we can have that really great conversation with them. So I think that's a really fun tool. It's not the prettiest interface, but it really does the trick and generates some good conversation. I also noticed I put one, where it says try it here. You could click on that link and then you can go and try it on your own and just, I'm curious. I'm going to go back to bed when we're finished here because I don't have to be up for a couple more hours really. But I want to come back to this and see the answer garden in Triciter or Triciter and see if you played around with it a little bit. It's pretty easy to use. I want to suggest another one without going through it, but it's called Kialo EDU. And if you use Kialo EDU, you probably have to create an account, or you'll have to create an account. But what's nice about that is it creates a scaffolded debate where you see the pros or what you agree on will come up in green, and then what you disagree on will come up in red, and it kind of scaffolds all the comments down, and you can keep a debate going. It's really kind of cool. Let's go to the next one, and I'll wrap it up after this one.
Will do. I'm getting the link for giving Triciter or however you pronounce it.
Whatever it's called.
Bit of a shot right there. And let's get you to the next slide.
Hey, and since we're on that too, remember, for something like Triciter, whatever it is, why not get another class in another school in another part of the world to join in? That's exactly what I did with it probably about 3 or 4 months ago. It's really great to connect kids from other schools and see how they're thinking in a different part of the world. Okay, so two apps from Google that use 360 imagery and Street View, but where you can also use 2D images. Absolutely awesome. The first is Google Earth Projects. I had the privilege of being on this Google Earth team for the last 2 years that was developing this as a teacher, and they just rolled it out last November. If you go into Google Earth, on the side, you're going to see a little button that says projects that did not exist until November 22nd last year for most of the planet. And And essentially, you can create a tour of places around the world, and you can add text, you can add 2D images, and you can also add YouTube videos, right? So it's a really cool tool where people can link. Now, the nice thing about projects is you can also collaborate. And you can make a tour as short or as long as you want. So if you have 2 students working on it, say you got 3 slides each, we want you to tell us about the tragedy of exploration and exploitation, right? That kind of thing. Really give them that thinking bit in there. And then they can take appropriate images, and remember, put your Creative Commons citations in there. Put that in there. There's also an HTML feature in here, which is really cool. Like the answer garden that you just saw a minute ago. I've actually done this with teachers where you can embed anything with a code you can embed in there. I've embedded Google Forms. I've embedded answer garden. Way cool stuff. There is a tutorial video on how to do that linked as well. Anyway, that's that image on the left that you see. That kind of gives you a view. Normally you have the bird's eye view, but you can actually click and drag Pegman and set it to have that street view where it takes you in. And that tutorial teaches you how to do that too. It's not difficult to use. I highly recommend it. Lastly, Google Tour Creator VR. It is totally cool. And basically 2D imagery. Well, you use 3D images from Street View. 2D images you can embed that create hotspots on scenes. You can create multiple scenes in this. And basically, as you scroll around one scene in 360, you can have hotspots that pop up, and they have a little bit of text and a little bit of and an image that gives more learning. It is so easy to use. I had a boy in grade 5 do this. So it's his personal project exhibition, PYP exhibition. I was mentoring him, and he created his own thing on dinosaurs in 360. Way cool stuff. The nice thing about this is you can actually upload this to Google Expeditions and look at it in VR, someday when you get back into the physical classroom, or they can look at it with their phones, iPads, tablets. You can add voice narration, really easy to use. And I got a tutorial online, my website or YouTube channel, Social Studies Samurai. Not a lot of content, but it's growing. So send me your ideas and tell me, hey, I'd like a video on how to do this, or here's an idea. Why don't you tell other people about it? Thank you, Rushton.
Awesome stuff. This is a really good reminder that there is, sometimes people think of geography and history separately. There's no meaningful discussion of either without the other, right? And so getting kids into that space of saying, okay, here's something we're looking at from another part of the world. It could be Street View for any city on the planet. And what kind of things do we begin to think about related to the history of this place based on what we're seeing? That's that opportunity. When we talk about provocations, I mean, the idea is really to get people to, provoke them to think, right? And that, I think, is why this can be so much fun for students. A couple other pieces in there that we wanted to mention. Maps Trex is a beautiful tool for getting kids to look at some part of the world in some interesting way. And these use the geo tools that are a part of Google, but then they also have a lot of stories within them as well. So you're able to kind of get into a well-crafted map that you can again explore a bit, and good fun. I have seen lots of parents come back and say, "Oh, I'm so glad we learned about that one." Time lapse, Susan, to say a little bit about time lapse.
So time lapse is great. It's also a part of Google Earth, or it's got some of the same. So what I love about time lapse is that it'll show a certain place, a certain piece of geography over time. So what that has to do with history is you can see, whether it's the expansion of housing, maybe it is changes in geography. A perfect example of this might be if I'm looking at the Florida coastline, and I'm looking at it and looking at it and looking at it, and all of a sudden there's a huge change. What do I know about what happened on that day? Well, maybe there was a severe weather situation that permanently altered the geography of the coastline there because of a hurricane or something that happened. So it's really interesting to watch, because oftentimes when you're watching the time lapses, you see slow growth, but occasionally there's this big gigantic shift in the look and just the nature of the geography, like a volcano exploding. If you're to look at a map for a while, then all of a sudden you see huge change. It might be, you can look at the date. What was significant about that date and what caused that big shift in the geography? So I really like looking at time lapse for that reason, that you can see, what caused that big change, or just again over time, whether that's the melting of the glaciers, or if that's something like urban sprawl or deforestation of like all of those things you can see through the visual story that is told in time lapse.
Absolutely. So, think of, for example, one of the classic time lapse pieces is looking at Las Vegas, and you bring it out far enough, and you see the reservoir to the right, to the east of Vegas, shrinking as Vegas gets bigger, right? And so for a lot of kids, that opportunity to go from, wow, that's something that's happened in the last 20 years or 30 years, to, wait a minute, what if this kind of thing happens over a much longer period of time? How does geography change over a period of time based on all manner of different things, whether it's a climate event, or whether it's growth, and how many different questions become a part of your economics studies or your science studies, environmental science studies. It's just so rich, in terms of good stuff to be able to work with. So,
Can I throw two more in there really quickly, Rushton?
Heck yeah, toss them in.
Two really great resources. Now, you may or may not have heard of Google My Maps. Really great for collaboration across your school, your district, or the whole planet. Give Google My Maps a shout out. I mean, there's so many different ideas you can use with Google My Maps, right? I don't know, do a travel journal, tell that story. I mean, the teaching history is all about telling the story, right? There's another one that I think a lot of people still don't know about. Two brothers in the United Kingdom have an app called Sutori, Sutori, and you can get it free during COVID right now. I think it's an awesome timeline app, but you can embed video, and you can embed images. You can put text in. You can put little quizzes and drag and drop things. It's connected to Google Classroom and other tools. I recommend checking out Sutori. Fabulous tool.
Fantastic.
Done.
And Nate, what I'll have you do is I'll have you add those to this particular slide, which is to say to all the viewers, right? When you go and you see the resources related to this webinar, so we actually have the different webinars arranged by show or theme, at this point. So there is a page dedicated to the variety of activities across grade levels webinars that Susan and I have done. So what you'll do is you'll find the recordings. We've got a video recording that we're making right now, and that will be embedded on that page. But also in the paragraph above it, you'll find where you can get to the slides and to the links that we mention. So it's not just the chat, it's actually the links that we mention along the way. So feel free to take a look at those. We'll get all of those in as well. Let's wind things down. If you are joining us for the recording, you are very welcome to stick around with us after we stop recording and ask a few questions. We'll stick around for a few minutes to do that. We love being able to talk to you guys about such things. So a reminder, what we do is we care for these kids. We care for their learning, and we do that by taking good care of ourselves. That includes finding opportunities to share cool thoughts. It means doing all of the basics of eating right and getting enough sleep. It's a crazy time. It's an absolutely crazy time. And taking care of yourself is important so that you'll be prepared to be creative and be insightful at a moment where a kid may really, really need that. We hope you'll sign up for the Next Vista newsletter. That link will go in the chat here in mere moments. I put out stuff every month that might be useful to you in any number of ways, things you might want to watch or read or try. We have contests that we're very happy for kids to take part in. We have different things that you might want to read. I do a blog called Inspiring Improvement, and I've written books on how to get better as a teacher, how to improve your school, and how to use tech to get better as a leader in terms of what you make happen at your school. So if you have some questions, feel free to toss them into the chat. We will wind the recording down, but first I want to give Nate a final word before we finish up.
No, just connect with me online at Nathan Gildart for Twitter, and go to my website. Again, it's a work in progress. You'll notice it says Rome wasn't built in a day, neither were we. So socialstudiessamurai.com, it's going to be a growing list of resources. I've got tutorial videos, but also resources you can use. For example, I've got one on Halloween that was featured on the Google Earth Education Resources page. Quite happy about that. But I've also put a little flippity Jeopardy game using Google Sheets. So things like that. So give it a look and shoot me an email and give me your suggestions or recommendations and that kind of thing. Thank you, Rushton and Susan, for having me today. Loved it. Good luck, everyone.
Susan.
And yeah, you can find me on Twitter at TechCoachSusan. And of course, you follow that hashtag K2Can2. And, both myself and a gazillion other amazing primary teachers are sharing what little learners can do.
My name is Rushton. I am a former teacher, former principal, and a nonprofit guy. And as I like to say about myself, I'm married up. All good. So I hope you will stick around for a discussion that we have following finishing the recording, but also that you will come back for more of the webinars that we do, because we love having you here. Thank you again, and we'll see you next week.